The mist is hazy, and the rays of sunlight blur before your eyes. Your body aches. You've come a long way, my dear protagonist, but now you've finally reached the mall. Opeth are known for their impressively vast discography. From Damnation to Ghost Reveries to Sorceress, pinning their sound down to any one genre is a gargantuan task for even the most dedicated music fans out there. However, as their sound and lineup shift, as constant as the changing tides of the sea, there is one constant: suffering. There is no such thing as happiness in Opeth's universe. Everything is dark, cold, black. Lit only by expiring candles or the moon's glow amidst the hazy twilight sky. Often, it is a woman who is shrouded in the shadows, holding the candle that expires, brought to the gallows to atone for her sins. How does Opeth explore the female tortured soul through their music? And more specifically, how does Mikael Akerfeldt use the power of his pen to speak to these experiences? That is the question I endeavour to answer today through exploring Opeth's first 4 albums, Orchid, Morningrise, My Arms Your Hearse, and last but not least, Still Life, which I personally consider to be Opeth's greatest work. I'm showing my last FM stats as proof of my credentials to speak on Opeth. See, look, I'm qualified. Before this video starts, here's a brief disclaimer that I truly, honest to God, do not know how to talk about music on a technical level. I am not a musician. I will absolutely refer to sections as that little riff or that little drum section rather than saying shit like the mitochondria of the symbols is Pythagorean in nature. Like, bitch, shut the fuck up. If that makes me a poser, then fuck it. I'll go and put on my Kill Switch Engage tee and drink from my Slaughter to Prevail mug and wrap myself up in my Slipknot bed sheets. I am a writer who deals in the art of words, so it is words, lyricism, symbolism, and delivery that I will be focusing on in this video. This video isn't really going to focus on what band members have said in interviews about the songs either. I mean, if you wanted to hear that, you'd just go watch the interviews, wouldn't you? You know? My goal with this video is to consider and explore new interpretations, regardless of what the band members may have intended to do with these songs. Okay, something, welcome back to GCSE English Lit, something, death of the author. I can't speak English, it's okay, let's go. Section 1, Expired Candles and Lone Orchids. Let's open with the first ever track of Opeth's first ever album, In Mist She Was Standing from Orchid, released 30 years ago in 1995. From the opening alone, it feels triumphant, like the battle cry of a freshly trained army dashing onto the battlefield on horseback, still with the light in their eyes and the pep in their step. In true Opeth style, they take fucking forever to get to the point. It's more than 2 minutes before we exit the intro and officially make it to the first verse, but this intro really does help to build up the story underpinning the song. Our protagonist has come out to meet his autumn lover in the mist. The wind contorts the trees, the wind gives wings to his stallion, and then as he passes the lake, Mikael screams this out, almost as if he's yelling across the lake to this mystery woman. Except, it's not a mystery woman, it's her shadow. She is represented by this abstract figure, a shadow that shifts depending on the position of the white light blazing from the clouds. And her shadow is distinct even within the darkness. This could imply 2 things. 1, that she is new to the darkness. She has not yet become fused with the darkness and she can therefore be saved. 2, she is isolated even by the darkness, occupying her own cadre of darkness to create a whole new tier of loneliness. As the third verse careens on, we learn that this shadow is awaiting our protagonist like the night awaits the day. This line communicates a great deal about the relationship they share. Although the day and night are indeed a natural pair, they never occur at the same time. They are forcibly parted by the middleman, evening. And so, we get the sense of a doomed romance here. In a genre where the subject matter typically ranges from blasphemous to brutal to grotesque, singing of a doomed romance is untrodden ground in the realm of death metal. Yet, here we are. Our protagonist is here. The shadow of his lover is within reach, and what's more, she's smiling at his presence. The drumming changes to reflect the shift in tone. It's the auditory equivalent of a ray of sun peeking in from your blinds after a torrential downpour. And the verse closes with the following. Mikael holds on to that light verbally as well, which is a nice touch. This is one thing I've always loved about his lyricism. He really brings his lyrics to life through thoughtful delivery, and it's not something I see enough people talk about. Holding that final word represents the light of this black candle enduring, and as we know, this light is representative of salvation. We get an instrumental section which becomes calmer as time passes, simpler. By 5:44, we're in total silence, almost as if depicting the life of a flame, burning, burning, dying, dying, dead. But it's a false death. It flickers back on its wick, weak but still burning on. This instrumental section is rich with different sounds and deliciously proggy tempo changes, representing the passage of time. It is 3 full minutes before we return to the story being told in this song. Mikael's vocals ease back in seamlessly, gliding right on top of the instrumentals as if they'd always been there. He sings of darkness enclosing, and he holds on to that last word, making us feel as if that single word is being wrapped around us, expanding and expanding until there is nowhere left for us to go. Punctuated with a little drum moment, he continues. This is genuinely my favourite part of this song. It's simple, sure, but the way he delivers this gives me genuine chills. It's so fucking good. But before we talk about delivery, I need to point out that we now know that it is the shadow of a woman who is holding the candle. The candle is the source of light, yes, but as its wielder, she can also be considered a source of light. This could represent a willingness to escape from the darkness she calls home, a dream of something beyond the solitude and silence that characterizes her daily existence. Yet, this revelation is Pyrrhic in nature, given that we learn that she's the light's wielder, in the same breath that we learn that said light is expiring, dying. Except, it isn't. It seems to expire. That doesn't mean that it has expired. Nonetheless, we know that the end is near for this candle, fighting the war on two fronts, the darkness and the cold. Its light is growing weaker, and as the light grows weaker, the intensity of the cold is conveyed through the anaphora of cold, cold. Now, to speak on the delivery of this section, this is 2 lines delivered as one long line, which adds to the feeling of darkness enclosing. These lines are crammed together, not having space to breathe independently. This feeling is further accentuated by the fact the next line begins with "and." He simulates the repetition of the word "hand," which is virtually indistinguishable from "and" in growled vocals, to mirror the repetition of "cold." Through the illusion of the word "hand" blending into the next line, we are further plunged into this narrow space where darkness is closing around us. To focus on the lyric matter itself, we would assume that perhaps this woman is the forlorn soul, not just lonely, but forlorn. Lonely to the point of it being pitiful. But the next line kills that assumption. It will fade away. Of the pronoun "it" makes it clear that we're speaking about the candle as a forlorn soul rather than its wielder. But if this candle can be referred to as a forlorn soul, this implies that this candle is not a candle at all, but a metaphorical representation of a life. It's open to interpretation, sure. So I'll list the two possibilities. One, this candle is a candle, but its flame is likened to a beaten heart, in that it is the only sign of life in a world that is still unmoving, silent and dark, and so it represents soul. The other possibility is that this candle is a real human that has just died in her hand. Personally, I lean towards this interpretation just because it's so much darker and feels so much more befitting for the hollow, void-like environment of darkness that Opeth's been painting for the entirety of this song. The fact that this declaration is then followed by 30 consecutive seconds of screaming could imply that this is a scream of agony, the loss of realizing that this candle, this life, has been snuffed. It isn't a semblance this time, but a certainty. He says will, not might. As he transitions from a way to a guttural scream, he is slowly ascending and ascending until bang! He is at the very top of his vocal register and he is fucking giving it to us. This section is so good. So good. In this transition, you can really hear how his voice becomes more forceful as he holds that note, which really helps to lend an element of realism to this moment, representing overwhelming grief. Grief that grows as it endures, rather than weakening. And then as he reprises that guttural scream, it is clear and focused like a fiery arrow poised right at the bullet's eye. He's really letting it out here. As he screams out, yeah. I'm not even gonna try and do it. I'm not gonna try and do it, but as he screams that out, it feels like his voice is just soaring across the soundscape, enclosing us in the same way the darkness did. And then he's at the bottom of his register, summoning up an evil-sounding growl from the depths of a cursed soul. Genuinely, like, this growl is chilling. It's the type of growl that seems to interrogate you. It's also necessary to discuss how the drumming in this section is slow, almost lethargic. But as Mikael screams out his grief, the drums become heavier, taking up more room in the song, and the drumming itself becomes more intense. Not necessarily faster. For death metal, it's what we'd call a steady pace. But within the context of this song, it feels faster. Okay, one more thing. Discussing these two lines as a unit, the words forlorn and fade occurring so closely to each other is an interesting touch. We've just had the anaphora of cold, illustrating the intensity of the cold. And now we've got some fun linguistic things happening here. The F sound is a voiceless fricative, which is nerd speak, conveying two things. So, voiceless just means that the vocal cords don't vibrate during the articulation of the sound, and fricative refers to the sound of any consonant that is produced by forcing air through a narrow channel. When pronouncing the F sound, it's necessary to lightly bite down on your lower lip to create the force necessary to push that sound out. Try producing the F sound with your mouth open. I'll give a 10 quid note to anyone who can do it. Genuinely, like, I mean, I'm saying that because it's impossible. I don't have 10 quid. I spent all my money on band merch and concert tickets. Like, look at this. I've got my Opeth bracelet on. I'm going to see Opeth tonight. And yeah, so yeah, I got no money. I spend all my money on Opeth. It is what it is. But that aside, the effect of putting these voiceless fricatives so closely to each other is that they exemplify just how cold it is by putting the emphasis on breathy noises. You can almost imagine the puffs of white breath coming out of his mouth as he says this. To hone in further on this line of analysis, repeat with me, forlorn soul. And again, forlorn soul. What do you notice? Your lips are forming an O shape the whole time. The same shape they'd form if they were about to blow a candle out. What does this imply? The speaker isn't just narrating events, he's actively participating in them. Just let you sit with that for a moment. Okay, moving on. We get another instrumental section, which peters out to just the guitars. They get louder and louder, and this is as clear of an indication as any that we're about to return to the main story. We are rewarded for our patience with the sound of rolling drums, creating a cushion for Mikael's incoming growls, and the story continues. In the darkness, the two lovers are not only together, they are touching. Surrounded by death, the protagonist finds new life in the flesh of the one who once wielded the light. Mikael is at a higher growl register here, and again, I just want to point out how natural his growls feel in general. He's insanely versatile. This song could be a portfolio saying, look at me, I'm the best growler in the world. Which is why I am so happy to see his growls back in all their glory on the last one in Testament, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Mikael being at a higher register here conveys a sense of passion, which is appropriate given the action that's being described. This shadow is now flesh. What does that imply? Has our protagonist been subsumed into the darkness, destroying the earlier established dichotomy between light and day? Or was she always there, but it took the death of that candle to reveal her human form? If we run with that second interpretation, we can assume that our female deuteragonist here has a deadly version of Midas' touch. Everything she touches turns to dead. This would explain her loneliness, and it would explain the distance that separates these two lovers. My blood flows forever. A blaze before the dawn. A kiss from sorrow decline. With this section, we learned that the first interpretation wasn't far off. Our protagonist hasn't been subsumed into our female deuteragonist's darkness. Rather, this is just an eclipse. Just so we're clear, an eclipse is when the light from one celestial body is fully obscured by the passage of another. As is the passage, it's just a moment in time. These two are wrapped up in each other. And honestly, I didn't know death metal could be so romantic. Look at them, true lovers. To touch on the My Blood Froze Forever line, it is interesting that this bodily contact makes him colder rather than hotter. Everything about the lyric content and the delivery suggests that it should have the opposite effect, but the fact that it doesn't hints towards the doomed nature of this romance. It also hints towards the fact that this female deuteragonist role is one of inherent destruction, inadvertently killing everything she touches. She's neither characterized as vengeful nor dangerous. We know that she is still and smiling, and she is trying to escape the darkness. Her inability to do so implies that she's cursed, and so where does that lead us? Our protagonist. He tries to save her with physical contact, with a kiss, but instead his exterior coldness becomes interior coldness. There's a pause, almost as if awaiting a change, a note of positivity, a sign, something. But all we get is yet another guttural scream of "Ah!" Okay, no. I'm not as good as Mikael, I'm sorry. And the entirety of this outro is screamed. Not growled, as if it were Mikael's natural speaking voice, but screamed. Each word pummels the listener forcefully. As you smile, watch it forever. I will not. Let us operate under the assumption that it is her saying, I am so cold, given that the delivery feels very different from the rest of the song. The words jump out as if spoken by lips that have never spoken before, and the word cold is delivered in such a way that it genuinely chills you down to the bone, which, funnily enough, is the exact effect this woman has on everything she interacts with, turning it cold and eventually dead. To break down the final line, first of all, if we opt for a more conventional word order, what is being conveyed here is that the twilight is enrobed in mist, and it is within the twilight that she was standing. This admission is whispered, closing out the song the same way it began. The first lyric is a whisper of 7 milestones. And the milestones here are literal stones showing distances to various places. In this case, the lake where he is to meet his lover. Here, we need to read between the lines. She was standing, which means she is no longer standing. If she is no longer standing, she is no longer there. Is she dead? Probably not. There was an eclipse. The eclipse has passed. The two of them are no more. This song was a journey towards something fleeting, a desire to turn a transient period into a place of refuge, a desire to transition from darkness to light, and above all, it is the crushing failure on each and every count. Okay, Side note before the next section. Mikael, if you're watching this, if it is that damn cold, get a space heater in that recording studio. I beg of you. I can't have my goat freezing to death. Every minute in this album it's so cold. Oh, freezing, cold, freezing, cold. Get a space heater. Please. Please. Like, I've spent so much on merch tickets. You've got the money. Space heater in the studio. I'll make a petition. Please. If you're still with me, thank you. Truly. Thank you. We are now at the second section of this video, Red Reflection in the Midst of the Moor. Now, admittedly, Morningrise doesn't have much in way of direct references to the tortured female soul, which is the topic of this video. However, I am including this as a heading for the sole reason that the third track, Nectar, does, in my opinion, reference Melinda, who will make her official appearance in Still Life, 2 albums from now. Note that Morningrise was released in 1996, while Still Life would be released 3 years later in 1999. It could be coincidental, sure, but considering the mention of red, combined with the final line being The More, which is the first track on Still Life, and the album cover of Still Life itself, I can't help but feel like this is a very clear reference to Melinda. Morningrise has a lot of moments like this where the lyrics in one song will form the basis of the following song. I'll point them out in this section, promise. And I'm not just talking out my ass. That aside, it's also undeniable that the subject matter of Nectar closely mirrors the subject matter of White Cluster, Still Life's crescendo. Now, I don't exactly consider Morningrise a prequel to Still Life. Morningrise is more of a thematic album, while Still Life is a concept album, meaning each song flows from one to the next, like a link of daisy chains. But I think there are moments in Morningrise that can inform our understanding of Still Life, and so I would primarily be looking at Morningrise through that lens. With the songs on Morningrise all being thematically linked, what exactly distinguishes them? Easy, the mood. Advent shows the fractures forming in the protagonist and Melinda's relationship. Let's break this down. A parlour strode is a bit of an obscure line, since if we interpret it literally, it doesn't really mean anything. But according to Google, parlour, apart from being a location, denotes a person who professes belief in, but does not actively support a specified, especially radical, political view. It's an adjective, so the usage here isn't quite correct, but the meaning holds up if we switch out parlour for a noun with similar meaning, heretic. So a heretic strode, in other words, walked with purpose, and the night sets forever. If we interpret this metaphorically, it could represent the process of one deciding to turn away from religion, embracing darkness in place of the symbolic light of religion. This interpretation is supported by what follows. If he is straying in the quiet cold, this means he has rejected the warmth of this so-called all-loving God. It is quiet because he has turned his back on his faith, and therefore his community. In a world where the speaker is alone, there is one person, Melinda, or his lover of no particular name, however you want to interpret it. But she isn't happy with the speaker. She girds him when he dares to listen. The more common usage of gird is in the sense of equip or prepare, and this is the usage of the word in the Bible, but I believe what Mikael was going for here was chastise, which is a more archaic usage. The use of a word with biblical inferences hints towards the fact that she will become a woman of the church, and it also shows that the reason for their initial fracture was a religious one, which is a theme that also crops up both in My Arms, Your Hearse and Still Life. I'm gonna be real. I cannot explain Elastic Meadow. My only explanation is that maybe Mikael was high on shrooms when he wrote this or something. I don't know. But the idea seems to be that the environment is unchanging. The meadow will always revert to its original form. Those arms of sorrow will never run out. This section is conveying the idea of abundance, all to contrast the speaker's inability to produce a single word. He is out of place here, and so he must leave, an idea that is explicitly stated in the next two lines.
Adapt to the wilderness, where even foes close their eyes and leave.
Moving on to the next verse, Mikael declares,
I will paint my face with my bare hand. Save it for me here.
Side note, I have always heard this line as, I will break my face with my bare hands. It's not what he's saying, but I wish it was. In my head, that is just the lyric now. But we're not here to discuss my headcanons for Morningrise. Okay, now insert pretty instrumental moment. I do love how this instrumental feels like the sonical representation of waiting for a silent clearing and finding a break in that clearing, and then
But you are beyond all help. The folded message that went my name.
personally, I interpret this as Melinda leaving him in the cold. She has gone from chastising him to begging him to change, which is how I interpret the idea of folding, to turn back and embrace religion again. But he will not be persuaded. Her emotion only serves to convince him of the fact that she is beyond all help. And then he goes, this almost feels like a command, which I love. The implication here is that if the shadows are skulking at his coming, he must be so evil that not even the shadows want to be touched by him. There is a second interpretation of him being the representation of light, but that feels unlikely given the type of band that Opeth is. Let me remind you that all the way up until what, 2023? 2021? I don't know. Around like somewhere between 2021 to 2023 anyway. Up until then, their Spotify artist bio was the most evil band in the world.
Survey the snow.
Okay, again, more hereticism and anti-religious themes. It appears that he's taken Melinda along with him, and he's trying to find the missing page that will convince her that religion is a farce. Then we get some beautiful bass playing here from Johan de Fatale. Fun trivia fact, this is the last album we get to hear his playing, which is a shame. His bass lines are so fucking good. Given that the bass typically melts into the background, it's interesting to listen to flashy bass moments like this. Or should I say, hear capture.
Time goes shine. Let the light that lays in you. We're almost there.
The instrumentation is more energetic, frantic here, representing the emotions of the speaker, his desperation to find the final piece of the puzzle that will win Melinda over, but he doesn't find it. The instrumental sandwiched between this repetition of "you are" feels like the musical equivalent of underlining, bolding, and italicizing a phrase all at the same time. It underscores the finality of the statement, the acceptance that there is nowhere left for them to go from here. There is no missing page that will convince Melinda to join in with his heretics. And so the song ends on this note.
Dancing into the void.
Now, this could be interpreted as suicide, but I view it as the natural end of their relationship. They are dancing, indicating that there is still love and good sentiment there, but there is a void that awaits them at the end. There is no happy ending, not even an ending at all. Just a void where there is no good or bad ending. A pause, shall we say. This brings us to The Night and the Silent Water, which we know was written about the death of Mikael's grandfather. So it doesn't really relate to the overall theme of this video, but I am going to highlight this lyric just because I love it.
I left him with a shed of stars. I had God to fight for me to live.
And so he vanishes into the night and the silent water. This brings us to Nectar, where the speaker arises once again from a lullaby. He is tempted by the prospect of being embraced by Melinda, just like when they were dancing together, and yet he knows it is tainted by the fact she has chosen religion over him, and she doesn't allow him to forget it either. Within the night, she's cursing him with every glance. And then we get to my favourite section in the entirety of Morningrise, which we are absolutely going to listen to in full right now. This is like the ultimate doomed lovers song. I'm not even kidding. This is the song I played when I saw my ex-lover for the last time. Every time I hear this song, I remember what it felt like to say goodbye. The heavy yet simultaneously hollow feeling I had in my chest. He wants her to reach beyond the confines of the night and carry his empty shadow so that the two of them can become one. He implies that there is a well of sin within her warped labyrinth, which I take to be a poetic way of referring to her heart, which he no longer has access to. And he wants her to take him there, with the promise that he will always love her. Beautiful. Oh my god. Mikael Akerfeldt's mind, like, this is why I love him. You know, and I think there's even like a blasphemous element to it as well, like, okay, so this well of sin in your heart, take me there and I will love you in all your sin forever. You know, like, you know, because it's like, if you think about it, religion tells you that in order to be worth loving, you have to be good and virtuous and free of sin. But Mikael here, well, the protagonist is saying, I accept you as you are in all of your sin, take me to the source of it so that we can be one and the same forever. You know, like, it's just so good. It's so good. It's so good. Like, who knew blasphemy could be so romantic? You know what I mean? Like, so romantic. Oh my god. Okay. Again, beautiful imagery here. The way I interpret this, the speaker has become ensnared by the night and is once again parted from his Melinda. This interpretation holds up pretty well to the following verse. Now, first of all, remember what I was saying about lyrics foreshadowing future songs? Essentially, there is distance between the speaker and Melinda. In saying she went as far as she could, there's an implication that there's something stopping her from going even further away. Knowing that these two keep finding each other over and over again, I get the sense that something is the speaker. She's strong enough to walk away, but not strong enough to disappear. She wants to hold on to her convictions, but she can't grapple with the pain of being alone in her convictions. And so she wavers in her judgment, thinking, maybe the speaker will light the way for me. But he is too rigid, and she will not become a sacrificial lamb. We know he's an outcast, propelled only by memories of a doomed love. He has no place in the world, but she does, and we're about to learn where that place is. Now, if we pay attention to the delivery of lines 4 to 5, there's no gap. He holds that final note for 8 counts and immediately jumps into, I witness your beauty. Then there's a gap before he concludes, felt your death, extending that final word the same way he did Moments. Delivering those two words in the same way, for me, implies that we're meant to find a link between them. This death he speaks of is momentary, symbolic even. Here, we have emerged from the night. The mist lingers, blocking out the light for some time, but it leaves in the same way Melinda has left him. I really love the touch of whispering, it's you, here. So good. It really adds this layer of soft, loving intimacy to this exchange. And with Melinda smiling at him, perhaps the symbolism of this dawn is that there is a new landscape in which they can find love. Until now, they have lingered in the darkness of one another. But what about if they stand together, in the light? Closing this off with a growl serves to reflect the intensity behind this realization, the surge of emotions at realizing that this suffering may find its end at long last. This leads us into Black Rose Immortal, an absolute mammoth of a track. I'm not analysing it here since that's a video in and of itself, but let it be known that I adore Black Rose Immortal like any other basic Opeth fan. It's practically an initiation test for anyone I date. If you can't sit through 20 minutes of this masterpiece, you don't deserve me. Finally, we reached the Bid You Farewell, which as of February the 12th, 2025, which is when this video was planned, I'm filming on the 21st, and I can confirm it has since hit 13 million, but at the time I was like, right now it has 12,999,000, no, what? I can't do maths. Okay, essentially it was like 336 streams away from hitting 13 million streams, and I was like, you can get there, you can do it, and it got there. But my point is, this is one of Opeth's most famous songs, likely due to the absence of growls, and it fits wonderfully into this analysis. This entire album, the speaker has been grappling with the idea of love and yearning, so to close off with a farewell is a definite end that we've been crawling towards this entire album. I mentioned at the beginning of this analysis that each song in Morningrise represents a different mood. Advent represented fractures. The Night and the Silent Waterer represents grief, specifically processing grief. Nectar represents the pain of letting go. Black Rose Immortal represents yearning. And To Bid You Farewell represents acceptance. We have gone through this kaleidoscope of emotions, and now we have reached the end. The speaker declares, there's a lot to unpack here. The sunrise gazes modestly through the coldest morning. First of all, I've always loved how Mikael humanizes the sun and the stars and the wind, while simultaneously dehumanizing actual human representations. People are shadows rather than people. They are ghost-like in their mannerisms. They do not move or interact with their environments much. They appear and reappear like phantoms. It's a wonderful bit of Opeth world building that I don't really hear people talk about. This coldest morning is essentially a window that the sunrise can gaze through, and this type of imagery increases the feeling of fragility, artificiality. Windows are created, not naturally occurring. Windows can be closed, opened, smashed. The speaker is obviously not comfortable within the daytime, but he endures it because, following on from the themes of Nectar, the daytime is able to provide a new backdrop for their love. But it doesn't change the fact that it is the night that is natural to the speaker. Alternatively, the sunrise could be representative of something more threatening. The speaker awaits it, not because he's excited for it, but because it's something that is inescapable, and so all he can do is wait. It evokes ideas of the inevitability of death.
Once it came you alive, embracing us over autumn's proud treetop.
Now, the alternative interpretation does hold more weight here. Melinda has to be lying about something. What is it? Perhaps she's lied about this threat, just to prolong the time she has with the speaker before he departs. He's well aware of the fact that she's lying, given that the sunrise is now embracing them, but he stays anyway. Again, we get the sense that something is unnatural here. Autumn and proud treetops don't go together. Leaves are meant to be parted from their branches in the autumn, but here autumn has failed to carry out its primary role. Autumn has lost the war against the trees. The idea being conveyed here is that these two are like leaves in autumn, destined to be parted, but defying the laws of nature in order to remain together, lying to each other and themselves. I could get this tattooed on my heart, genuinely. But to get to the analysis, it seems nature has finally intervened, this time in the form of falling rain. God, I've cried so many times to this song. It just brings up so many memories, you know? You're not a true Opeth fan if you haven't allowed the rain to soak you inside out while listening to this song. But that aside, parades are usually a joyous celebration, and so I take this as nature celebrating the fact that the balance has been restored at long last. These two lovers have been torn apart. The leaves have been parted from their branches. Note the contrast between the speaker, who is motionless, and the rain, which is in motion. Yet, as he is deprived of the sound of her voice, he takes on the characteristics of the rain. Devotion alludes, for me, speaks to the fact that Melinda is no longer devoted to him. This whole time it is devotion that has kept her coming back. But she has waned in this devotion, and it is the realization of this that has been killing the speaker. This line, for me, also speaks to the lack, or rather the loss, of religious affiliation for the speaker. He is now cursed due to this, hence why he is standing without a soul. He stands in his own ashes as if he's just shed the body of his former self, a former version of himself that was able to love and entertain religious delusions. Now he is irrevocably changed. Melinda weeps because she wanted to avoid this, but she cannot lie anymore, and so she gives the definitive answer: I know.
We walk to the night. To bid you farewell. Why can't you see that I try? Whenever tear I shed,
The song, and therefore the album, ends with this open question. We are now at section number 3 of this video, A Widow's Reprieve in Religion. So, it's as it sounds, we are taking a brief reprieve from Melinda's story and entering Opeth's first concept album, My Arms, Your Hearse, the title inspired by a lyric in the song Drip Drip by Comus, As I carry you to your grave, my arms, your hearse. Martin Lopez's drumming on this is delightful. Contrasted against the first 2 albums, you really feel the difference. The drums take on more prominence, and it just feels so much livelier, you know? Shout out Lopez. And Mikael's vocals are delightful here. Like, I don't even need to look at Genius to know what he's saying. I mean, don't get me wrong, Opeth's lyrics are tattooed on my brain at this point, but even now, while filming this video, I've talked about mishearing Opeth lyrics and just mentally replacing them with my version. None of that in My Arms, Your Hearse. These growls are so crisp, so clear. It's my firm belief that this is their most evil album in terms of vibes. It feels so dark and imposing, like every song is closing around you, pushing you into a corner. But returning to the album. So thematically, this follows the life of a ghost who has come back to see what his loved ones are up to. And by loved ones, I mean his widow. So, in April Ethereal, we focus on the speaker's widow. The sibilants of she, swathed, sorrow all create tension and unease. The idea of being born within sorrow's mask is an interesting one too. The implication here is that even sorrow has a softer side that hides behind a mask, but she is born within this mask, within the most extreme form of sorrow that is shown to the world, and it is this sorrow that raises her into the world, isolating her from any form of happiness. I take the icon to be a reference to God. God finds pleasure in the sadness of this woman. Her candlelight being snuffed is also an interesting word choice. Snuff can also refer to death more literally. So the idea here is that death follows her everywhere she goes. It isn't just her lover that's died, it's the very candle that lights the way for her that has also died. And even in her wake, there is nothing to fill the void. The light that had previously filled the void has been snuffed, and with God smiling at her misfortune, he certainly isn't going to step in to do anything about it. She spends the remainder of the song oblivious to the fact that her lover is watching over her, and sinks deeper into sorrow. In the final verse, we hear dialogue from her. Laughing and weeping at once, take me away. Mikael holds that away for 16 counts. Insane. You can really feel her lack of will to live here. When you are up to your neck in depression, you feel so helpless that sometimes you're torn between laughing how pathetic your existence is or crying yet again. And now we approach when. Still life reference, still life reference, still life reference. No, I'm kidding. I'm just being annoying. You can tell what my favourite Opeth album is. Anyway. Her lips twist in a way that defies nature. Her face is compared to a grave. Our widow was still in the fucking pits here. Somebody get this woman a goddamn Long Island iced tea. I'm begging, like. Once inside, I heard whispers in the parlor. Okay, really brief interruption here to say, God Damn it. What is it with Mikael Akerfeldt and Parlors? We talk about his obsession with sorrow, but I think Parlor would be a worthy entry of things that always seem to make their way into Opeth songs. You know, like this is the 4th appearance of the word parlor, the first 2 occurring in Orchid, and the 3rd mention appearing in Morningrise. Okay, interruption over.
And I cry. I knew she had lied. The possession had died.
So, this widow has finally moved on from the memory of her lover, or at least that is what the lover is assuming has happened. Considering how April Ethereal lingers on how everything dies in her presence, it stands to reason that her love for him would also die. Let's hone in on that. This love, the one thing she had left, is something she allows to die. Allegedly. She doesn't seem particularly happy about it. Lips twist, face grave. But she was born within sorrow. Sorrow is all she has ever known. Whether she clings to the memory of her loved one or lets go, she is doomed to a lifetime of sorrow either way. But, again, as I've been repeating this whole time, consider that this is just projection on the part of the ghost. Has she actually lied? Or is he just assuming that because she can't see him, she no longer loves him?
Hi, hello. So this is a post-production note. I skipped over the fact that the lyrics actually say obsession, not love. So forgive me for that mistake. The use of the word obsession changes things, since the implication here is that sorrow rules her life to the point that love is an emotion she can't express, and so she relies on obsession as a substitute for love. Relationships built on obsession rather than love tend to turn toxic really fast. Think of a parasocial relationship between a fan and a celebrity, for example. Once the fan feels like they've been slighted by a celebrity they looked up to, they will often lash out in retaliation, as they believe this parasocial relationship of theirs went both ways, when this is in fact not the case. Of course, it's different here since these two were married, but my overall point is that obsession breeds toxicity, which is exactly what we'll see later on in this video. The use of the word obsession is also important. Since obsession serves to contrast sorrow, one obsession dying implies that there will be a replacement in due course. Okay, back to the video.
If we jump over to the Amen corner, or Amen? 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 Amen corner? I don't know! Like I've always said like Amen, like, Amen. But like Amen. I don't know, is it like one of those like British American things, like the British say Amen and I don't know. I'm saying Amen. The Amen corner. We see the following. So, she has turned to religion to get over him, which pisses him off. Again, this opening reminds me so much of the More. The themes of summer, religion being something the speaker's lover embraces while the speaker expresses his displeasure at that, the themes of being reunited, yeah. But as we'll later learn, the speaker isn't quite as loving as the one depicted in Still Life. Our widow hides her face here, implying that her hands have become a mask for her. This implies that perhaps she has found a temporary reprieve from the mask of sorrow. It's important to note that hiding implies that the sorrow itself hasn't disappeared. She just pretends not to see it. And as the speaker continues, we learn that she hasn't forgotten about him after all. She believes that the sounds might be him coming back, and so it implies that there is a part of her heart that still belongs to him rather than religion. Those eerie circles upon the waters seem to be a reference to the speaker himself, who refuses to let go of their bond. And this leads us to the dark and eerie demon of the fall. Side note, but when I was first getting into Opeth like 8 years ago, I always used to skip the song because of the opening. Had it silenced on Spotify and all. Those weird distorted sounds immediately elicited a reaction of, what the fuck is this shit? And I went to seek refuge in Credence. It wasn't until I saw them play it live in 2022 that I realised how good of a song it was. Anyway, touching on this opening, given that we've just come away from a mention of eerie circles upon the water, I get the sense that the speaker is actually underwater and fighting to come back to the real world. Once the distortion fades, he has reassumed a physical form and is ready to become the demon of the fall that has become a fan favourite on set lists. And remains a fan favourite. The idea of a silent dance is contradictory. When you move, your feet make noise against the ground, your clothes brush against your skin. Sometimes there's music to lead the way. Perhaps the speaker's a ballet dancer, so light on his feet that he doesn't make a single noise. But, interpreting this more metaphorically, perhaps the silence of this dance is implying that he and death share one mind. They move in a manner that is so synchronized they don't make a single noise. He has become death,
Destroyer of all worlds.
Autumn also returns as a theme. We last saw Autumn's proud treetops into bid you farewell, a stubborn little season that refused to bend to the laws of nature. And it seems that Autumn has once again decided to ruin everything! Yay! In the summer, the speaker was content to watch his love. But Autumn has defied the laws of nature in bringing him back to life. And now that he is intertwined with death, he has acquired the deadly Midas touch of the woman standing in the mist. His widow is going to die. Okay, now, I don't know how to explain it, but Mikael's vocals feel different here. I don't know if he's layered his vocals or if he's used some sort of distortion effect to sound more evil, but whatever the fuck it is, it's working. My god, like... Whew. Anyway, we are back to the widow, and here we see the effects of listening to the speaker's unreliable narration. This whole time, the speaker has been obsessed with her, following her, believing that she is sad because she's died. No, because he's died, sorry. But how do we know that she isn't sad because of the person he was before he died? The way he speaks of her sorrow in the tracks leading up to this, it is made very clear that sorrow is an inherent part of who this woman is. At first we assume that it's because of his death, but if it's inherent, it's been exaggerated by his death, not created. So who inculcated that sorrow in her? I'll leave that as an open question. Think about it while we go through the rest of this song. The way I see it, she's been mourning him, not because he was a good husband, but because he fucked off before she could have her chance at redemption. And now she has to fill the cracks and figure out who she is without a controlling presence hanging over her. The speaker, being just as controlling beyond the grave as he was in life, can't stand the idea of this widow becoming her own person with religion as her talisman. And so he is revived by sheer hatred. She sees nothing, but based on his hateful aura, she knows he is near. This says a lot about what their dynamic must have been like when he was alive. When he is being loving, she cannot sense him because it doesn't match what she knew when he was alive. She senses him only in his hatred. It also explains why she was hiding her face in the last track, why she snatches at every sound. She's scared. This woman is scared. This isn't a romantic album about him watching over his lost love as he thinks it is. It's the horror story of a woman being haunted by her abusive husband beyond the grave. And now, we've reached the soaring crescendo of this story. Based on the words false love, we can tell that the speaker is saying this about her, which sounds more like projection than anything else. He claims her love is conditional, that her love had died in favour of religion, but his love is equally as conditional. Think about it. He was happy to watch her descend deeper and deeper into a depressive state, but her finding solace is what ignites him with enough hatred to bring him back to life. He's misery personified, if you think of that phrase, misery loves company. And now, as if being two sides of the same coin, his false love has turned to hate. Pure hate. The speaker intertwines himself with death. Love turns to hate. Wind merges into grey, grey representing the unknown. Grey is the combination of black and white, perhaps the combination of this white summer and black night. Whatever the case, the spell has been cast and the transformation is complete. The implication here is that she's been running, given that she's out of breath, and has likely tripped while running. She gets up, but she doesn't take action. She doesn't push at those closed doors, she screams at them. It's important to note that closed doesn't mean locked. The way I interpret it, she's scared of what might be awaiting her beyond those closed doors. She doesn't know where the speaker is. All she knows is that the speaker isn't in this room where she is screaming, and so she will stay here, rather than facing the unknown. This could also be a wider commentary on the mindset of those who turn to religion in times of trouble, rather than pushing through those closed doors and seeing the world for what it really is. The cocoon of predictability then becomes the same cocoon that will lead to one's demise, as we will later see. Touching on the final two lines here, I interpret this as the speaker being behind one of these doors, and although they're closed, he can still smell her. Mist is an interesting word here. It refers to droplets of water suspended in the air, but it also refers to tears, to something that blurs perception. The widow is gasping, screaming, and now she's maybe crying, and the scent produced by her despair is drawing him in ever deeper. Her despair is like foreplay for him in a twisted way, hence why the word seductive is used in reference to her mist. If this is just foreplay, chances are that it isn't going to stop here. This reading is all but confirmed in the following line. I shan't resist. The use of the word resist shows that he is giving in to primal urges at this point in the song. He has now entered the room. Or maybe he was always there, and he's chosen this moment to reveal his face. It's confirmed that the widow is indeed crying. She's able to turn around and face him, implying that he snuck up on her in order to kill her. The switch to clean vocals for the remainder of the song implies a shift in mentality on the speaker's part. Now that he can actually see the pain in his widow's eyes, he's experiencing a change of heart. He doesn't want her to die. He wants her to get away from him, but it's too late. This is reflecting on how easy it was for him to kill her. I think it's interesting he says just 1 second here. It's the same turn of phrase you use when someone asks you to do something when you're already in the middle of doing something else, and you reply with, just 1 second, letting them know you'll do it once you've carried out your current task. While his loving side was telling his widow to run away, his demon side tells him just 1 second, and just like that, he was left with nothing. This isn't actually true. If his widow is dead, there should be a corpse, but a corpse is useless to him. She can no longer love him or fear him, and therefore there is nothing left. This leads us to Credence, one of my favourite ever acoustic tracks from Opeth.
Started again. You speak to me through the shadow, walking in closed rooms. You sing cold words.
Imagine there's a silent bi religion when the speaker says deserted again. He severed his widow's tie with religion, and so she has no choice but to speak to him. But she isn't happy about it. She walks in closed rooms, implying she doesn't want him to reach her, and she uses cold words, implying she doesn't want him to find warmth in her. Now that she is dead and able to express herself on her own terms, he can no longer pretend that she still loves him. As the song progresses, she won't even speak to him anymore. Strange silhouettes do the whispering and screaming on her behalf, and within the same verse, those silhouettes turn away from him. Both her and her proxies reject him for the following reason: unable to face more of this death. Remember, in the last song, the speaker becomes intertwined with death, so this is indeed referring to him.
Laughter weeps the truth. Push me into the corner, confirming the epitaph of my soul, and displaying the once unknown.
In short, she won. She's laughing now, seeing him in the pits of despair, and her laughter is poised to alienate him even further. This is where the widow's story ends. After a lifetime of sorrow, and after being torn away from the religious texts in which she found solace, she is able to find a sense of self at long last. Her murder at his hands symbolically frees her from the seemingly inescapable option between loving him or fearing him, and now she is able to choose a third option, living for herself beyond the confines of this world. It's as happy of an ending as any Opeth character can ask for, really. And so, we have reached the final part of this video that we've been building up to since the very beginning. Section 4, the tragedy of Melinda, small towns and small minds. So, obviously, outfit change, had to do it. Also, I was losing light, so I'm filming on a different day, which is why we've got the sun now, very glorious, not very Opethian, but it will do. So, we begin with the moor. It's been 15 summers since our protagonist set foot in this area, and now he's back.
I'm officially announcing I'm back. You better believe I'm back. Full time. Better than ever. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
He's vengeful, as verse 5 reveals.
There is no forgiveness in these arms for any of you.
Who's the one? Who's the one?
Spell the mist for now. Melinda.
She's here! At long last, she's here. And given how tender our protagonist is being, she isn't going to meet the same fate as the widow in My Arms, Your Hearse. What's more, we actually get a sense of what she looks like. I mean, of course, this being an Opeth song, Mikael is never going to say she was a black-haired woman with a fat ass sculpted by the gods, but instead... A pyre is a combustible heap for burning bodies. As you can imagine, a couple of water drops is not going to put a fire out. This implies that while she's a well-meaning person who has her heart in the right place, and it's also the type of person who would like to help others, she's also weak. Being water drops rather than water itself serves to emphasize her weakness, imparting a delicate nature upon her. The Bible refers to thistles and prickles as a symbol of desolation or wilderness, hinting towards her sadness. Thistles are a wild flower known for being spiky, showing that while her emotions make her weak, she isn't a weak person physically. The fact he is able to hold her without being injured by her spikes means that she trusts him, and also that he is sufficiently gentle with her. Stained and torn, aged and brown, could just be reflecting on the changes that have transpired in the 15 years since he last saw her. Stained and torn could imply that her wild nature has been corrupted by religion, while aged and brown is simply referring to time passing and them currently being in summer. Melinda's rocking a sweet summer tan. Nice. The final line pretty much restates what has already been implied, just in clearer language, and that is the more. Now, moving on to Godhead's lament, Melinda is seen in crumbling faith, bearing her pain in the wilderness. The implication here is that she isn't happy about this new life of nunhood that's been thrust upon her. The wilderness, which is the natural resting place for a thistle, is where she can openly show her pain. She isn't able to do this in the place that she calls home. Meanwhile, this faith of hers that is crumbling doesn't look too stable, methinks. Crumbling implies many different things: aging, neglect, instability, and those things all apply here. It's been 15 years of following a faith which was meant to fulfill her more than her lost love ever did, but all it took was one glimpse of him to threaten 15 years of religious indoctrination. The first track makes it abundantly clear what the townspeople think of him. She too would have been led to believe these things. But knowing the protagonist in the way that other townspeople don't, the logical thought is, if his heart is still good, then does that make me an ungodly freak? Me? A defiler? Here, the crumbling faith just isn't in God, but also in herself and everything that has comprised her belief system up to this very point. The final line focuses on her gleaming eyes, showing that there is an emotional response at the sight of her long-lost lover. This, contrasted against her pain, shows that their love must have brought her more joy than religion ever did. We're not told what she knew, but it's pretty obvious. She knows that he has returned for her. Now, 1 second, my foot's gone, like, completely dead. I'm just, God, pins and needles. Oh my god. I'm sorry. I'm gonna edit this out. Okay. Now we reach Benighted, where the protagonist paints a picture for Melinda. In the night, their love can be reborn. They can escape their weak and crumbling lives, and he can get lost in what's vanished from her eyes. Her eyes don't just have to gleam for a single moment. They can gleam like that forever, even in the night. The fact that this is the only song... Okay, no, not the only. One of two of the only songs in entirely clean vocals really does make it stand out as being tender, heartfelt, a letter from one heart to another. So let's talk about what benighted really means. So benighted can mean in a state of pitiful intellectual or moral ignorance, or it can mean overtaken by darkness. Both of these being themes which crop up in Opeth's music. With the line, "What came and distorted your sight?" this can be interpreted both in a figurative sense, religion, and a literal sense, darkness. It's actually a really clever refrain. He's making an observation about the fact that her religious adherence is driven by fear, and that being a blind follower will only plunge her deeper into the darkness that has robbed the light from her eyes. To go off on a slight tangent for a minute, this album is one that has always resonated with me as an ex-Christian. My personal experience of Christianity is that it was forced on me. I grew up thinking it was the default, and I was never really given the opportunity to have a different opinion. I was a Christian not because I believed in it, but because I was figuratively in the dark about the fact that other viewpoints existed. The second I heard that atheism was a thing, it was very much a blinkers coming off type of moment. Like, wait, I'm allowed to think like this? Other people think like this? Crazy. But, to return to the song itself, songs like Benighted make me wonder how many love stories have been cut short by the looming threat of religion. Think about it. There's a whole stereotype of Catholic guilt making it hard for women in particular to have normal relationships with people, even after they've let go of the whole religion thing. Feeling like they're sinful just for experiencing natural human desires. that feeling goes tenfold if they're a woman experiencing feelings towards another woman, a man experiencing feelings towards another man. God forbid. What I love about this album as a whole is that technically the protagonist is gender neutral. I'm saying he and him because it's Mikael Akerfeldt on the vocals, but this protagonist could theoretically be anyone. I don't know. Being a bisexual woman myself, this album really does capture the feeling of what it's like to fall for a religious girl who decides to choose her religion over you because she's got too much internalized homophobia. You can leave the religion, but the religion doesn't always leave you. Not immediately. This song really is so beautiful. I would go as far as to say that it's a top contender for Opeth's best ballad. Anyway, let's continue.
Coming to this night, you're light alone. Carry your weight, you are flawed as all of us. Coming to this night, your only hope. It's never too late to
Here, the protagonist is appropriating the language of the church in order to persuade Melinda to join him. I think this section is pretty interesting. Obviously, this album is highly critical of Christianity. I'd say, out of their entire discography, this is the most blasphemous album they've ever put out, so, yeah. Using language that aligns himself with Christianity is a really interesting narrative choice. The way I interpret it is like Mikael is implying that love is a religion in and of itself, which feels like quite a negative thing knowing his views on religion. Now, this is just a theory, but this whole concept of this protagonist returning to the city to save Melinda, believing that she needs to be saved from religion, well, it kind of vests her of her autonomy, doesn't it? Obviously, she loves him, he loves her, but it's obvious that this religious disagreement was the reason for their split in the first place. He's come back believing that absence would make the heart grow fonder, but ultimately, if he's using the same tactics as the religion he criticizes, is he really much better than the church? Really? It's not personally what I think, just because for my own sanity, I need to believe that this is a true love story. And it is! The protagonist realizes that his loved one is not able to be herself in this city. She's so deep in the indoctrination that she can't beat it herself, and so he's trying to mirror language that is familiar to her, to make the process easier. He was under the same oppressive regime once upon a time too. Perhaps it's also a reflection of how, as I said earlier, you can leave religion, but the religion doesn't leave you.
Coming to this night when you're able to undo your deeds and atone with your lonely soul.
Blasphemy!
What's your intent
Okay,
this
let's keep going.
night? All minds are stable. Forget all your needs, lose a grip over control.
Outro is so groovy. Okay, personally, I think there's an element of fantasy in this as well. Again, it could almost be a satirical take on how churches make all these grand promises about what is awaiting devout churchgoers in the afterlife, and it's like, well, yeah, you can say that there's unlimited prosecco and fluffy wool jumpers and 24/7 gospel music in heaven. The same way I can say I'm a billionaire, my dad's Bill Gates, and I own 3,000 mansions. I could say that. It doesn't make it true. You know what I mean? He's saying stuff like, forget all your needs, lose the grip of all control, which is essentially the essence of religion. You give yourself over to a higher power and absolve yourself of agency over your own life. People will achieve amazing things in life and say glory be to God, when it's like, bro, that wasn't God, that was you did that. This idea that you're not allowed to be proud of your own achievements and the work that you put into achieving something, and you instead have to hand that happiness over to a higher power, that's one thing I've never understood for the life of me. This is contrasted with him saying, when you're able, which recognizes that she does have free will. However, that line can be read two different ways. The first way is, you can come into this night when you're able to do so, and then you can undo your deeds and atone with your lonely soul. And the second way is, you can come into this night only when you're able to undo your deeds and atone. Now, obviously, the first way gives her free will. The second way, however, reads a lot more like a command. The way Mikael sings this, it sounds a lot more like the first way, but reading the plain lyrics opens up another route of interpretation. I think this is another veiled criticism of how the idea of free will under a religion is a farce, how religion seeks to control you while presenting it as something you can choose. And now, we reach Moonlap's Vertigo. Verse 2 of this? Yeah, I'm just gonna play it. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I need a moment. Oh my god. This section is too good. Like, you know, so far we've had sad mourning lover and vengeful lover who kills his wife. So now that we've got star-crossed lover who will kill for his woman, we used to pray for times like this. It's so good. Like, whenever I'm trying to get people into Opeth, this is the song I choose, and this is the section I single out. It's too fucking good. Okay. So anyway, the protagonist knows that the townspeople are judging Melinda, and he's threatening to put them down. Real shit. He's stressed about the situation, but he states nothing of this is in vain, as he will be able to save her from the past. I'm assuming that this is maybe a little dig at the fact that many religious ideals tend to be seen as outdated today, but that's just an assumption. And now, we are at her title track, Face of Melinda.
By the turnstile beckons a damsel fair. Face of Melinda neath blackened hair. No joy would flicker in her eyes. Brooding sadness.
She's just like me for real. No, but I like this. It shows her taking more agency in the story. She's the one who beckons him. The fact that she hides her face beneath her hair hints towards a reserved nature, a desire to remain hidden. She's lived in a state of sadness for so long that it's become her natural state of existence. Her eyes gleamed upon spotting the protagonist for the first time. But even while knowing she's pleased by his presence, she's so emotionally numb that she no longer knows how to express it. She's trying to apologize to him, but she's, in a protagonist's words, a harlot of God upon the earth. As a nun, she's sworn her vows to the church and can't go away with him. But that doesn't stop our protagonist, who confidently declares,
I took her by the hand to say, all faith forever as we wash away.
this is so dramatic. Like, all the faith? Really? You washed all of the faith away? That's a tall task, but okay. Anyway, again, he's reappropriating the language of the church, replacing sin with faith. By flipping religion on its head with one word change, he's demonstrating the fragility of the words that have governed her life up until this point. And in doing this, he makes it abundantly clear that he doesn't give a fuck about the vows or the nunnery. He just wants her. They're staring at each other on some real lover's business, but the moment shifts, which is what he means by broke the rhyme, when she brings up her religious duties, which the protagonist refers to as vices. The blasphemy of this album is crazy, man. Okay, Still Life has so many great lines, and this is one of them. My promise is made, but my heart is fine. Like, oh my god. That's true lover girl shit. Like, Melinda's so real. Like, she revived the moment with this one line. Now, let's linger on this for a while longer, because we all know what's coming next. There's no such thing as a happy ending in an Opeth album. No such thing. You know, like, this is the highest point of the album. You know, that doesn't exist. A high point in an Opeth album, that doesn't exist, but it exists here, and it's so beautiful. It just makes what follows even more crushing. Okay, are we ready? Are we ready for heartbreak? Okay, let's do it. She's dead. It's over. She's gone. The chaos of the moment is reflected by the absence of rhyme. It's a fluid retelling of events, fraught with shock and grief. And now we reach the chorus. I love this chorus so much. Serenity painted death is just a really evocative phrase in general. This doesn't relate to the actual storyline of Still Life, but looking at this in isolation, it makes me think of the theme of beautiful women being haunted by the inevitability of death, and being more concerned by the loss of beauty than the loss of their own lives. Still Life feels like an inversion of that trope. This entire time, she has hidden herself, as is the way of Catholic modesty. She's been characterized by brooding sadness that permeates her very being. On the cover of an album, her face is hidden. Her hand is poised at her eye, almost as if wiping away a tear. Yet now, it is in death that we see her grin. This entire time we've been focused on her eyes, but now we see her face. She's no longer hiding, precisely because she is unable to. And in her full splendor, she is free. It is a haggard grin, but it is a grin nonetheless. She is serenity. The state of death is something that has been applied to her like a streak of paint, and there's a halo above her, implying that she's destined for heaven. Except this is a halo of bitter disease. Again, this is the protagonist's cynicism seeping in. If there was a heaven, she'd be there. But there is no heaven, only bitter disease, which is a metaphor for death. Finally, she's described as a black paragon in lingering breath. I'm just going to pause until those motorcycles go away. Okay. This exemplifies the idea of her being the embodiment of excellence, but her potential has been snuffed, and now all that remains is a lingering breath. I think this really does reflect just how many women have had their dreams snuffed due to religion. There was some story a while back about this woman who got a Juilliard ballet education, which is notoriously difficult, and she was obviously very passionate about it, but she gave it up to do some Christian tradwife thing with this man who treats her like a baby factory and views her as his property. That was just a very publicized example, but this is something that happens to thousands of women. Religion is pushed onto them, used to control them, and ultimately used to deprive them of free will over their lives. Leaving isn't always easy either. People get disowned from their families for abandoning religion. Some get killed. Honor killings, anyone? And in the olden days, women had free choices if they didn't get married. Become a nun, become a prostitute, or live on the fringe of society until it's arbitrarily decided that they must be a witch, since that's what witches do, and they get killed. In Melinda's case, being a nun was the only option that would allow her to move on from her lover without replacing him with another man and try to lead a fruitful life. She'd be receiving an education, housing, lodging, clothing. That's why even women from noble families would choose to become nuns sometimes. It was the only way to regain some semblance of autonomy in a society where women were socially and legally treated as property. With no obligation to bear children or a husband's last name, it gave women the space for other creative pursuits. Within the confines of the church, of course, but it was still better than nothing. Still Life is a story about two star-crossed lovers who were ultimately parted by an intolerant religion that would not accept their love. But it is also the story of a woman who tried to find herself over and over again, but could only find happiness in death. Giving herself over to a higher power wasn't the key to happiness. Giving up entirely, however, hell yeah. Of course, I'm not saying that's the lesson we should take from Still Life. Suicide is never the answer. But Melinda's story is so painfully tragic and so painfully real. It might not be written from her perspective, but out of any Opeth album, this is the album that peers hardest into the effects of religion on women, and how it can breed doubt and self-isolation and ultimately lead to one's demise. It's such an important album. And it's the reason I made this entire video. So, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. There will be future content on Opeth videos. I'm thinking about doing one that focuses on the representation of mothers in Opeth's later albums. That's the thought right now. But for the time being, this is it for today. So yeah, thank you for watching. One more thing, actually. Okay, so obviously the moral, well, not the moral, but the story of Still Life being that Melinda could only find happiness in death. I think that's also a really astute observation about how basically nobody ever believes women and their sadness until they're dead. You know? Like, if a woman is still alive, then it's, oh, well, it can't be that bad if you're still alive. It can't be that bad if you're still kicking. It can't be that bad if you're still there. You know, like, a woman's word, a woman's face is never trusted. It is only her death, when she can no longer speak for herself, when she can no longer represent herself, that people will understand her pain, that people will take her seriously. You know, I think this is almost an indictment of that. Because, you know, this protagonist, he saw her in her pain and he believed her. Meanwhile, the other townspeople just talked behind her back and treated her like she was nothing, which is essentially the vibe we're getting from this. You know, like, if she's in that much pain, if she's standing in the wilderness alone, it's because she's also an outcast in a different way. You know, she is begrudgingly accepted because she's a nun, but people do not actually like her. People do not actually care about her. She is lonely even when surrounded by a community that should be embracing her, in theory. So, I don't know, I think Still Life is also a really interesting album that sheds some light on, you know, the idea of female loneliness and what drives that and what underpins that. This whole idea of feeling alone even when you're around people, because they're there but they don't see you. They see what's on the surface but they don't care to look inside. And I don't know, obviously the ending of this is very depressing, but I don't know. Yeah, no, it was just a thought. Like, I literally thought of this right after I stopped recording, and I just wanted to add it in as like a quick point before going. But yeah, I think my overall point is that a woman shouldn't have to die in order for her pain to be taken seriously. I'd like to think that the natural point forward would be for us to hear women while they're alive, to hear them before they have to die.